Hi guys, so welcome back to our global variable and local variable conversation introduction to Python. In the last session, we talked about global variables being accessible anywhere, right? So check out that video and you'll see that what a global variable is when it comes to Python functions. Now the global variable would not make so much sense if we cannot or if we do not talk about the local variable. Now the first thing about the local variable, it's private to a function. So private to a function. When we say it's private to a function, what does that mean? In Python functions, there are situations where you may need to create a variable inside a function. And here's an example. Say I am trying to calculate tax. And here is I create a function using the def keyword. I call this calculate. Of course, this function does not have a parameter. Right now, inside of the function, I create tax. Now, tax is a variable. Now, this variable is inside the function. So it's in the block of code of the Python function. So now what I do is I give this point 1. Now, what is this? This is a local variable. It's like a personal sticky note. It can only be accessed by the creator personally. Right? When we use that analogy for sticky notes, with respect, and the opposite end is the public whiteboard, right? Now we have tax. Now with this, I can go and say print, and I say tax rate. I call this tax rate. Now this function is now supposed to show us, give us, an output of a tax rate. Now I'm going to do something really interesting, right? I am going to run this and then try to do stuff here. First off, when I use calculate, it's going to bring out a tax rate of 0.1. So because it references this local variable. However, I say print tax side of the conversation is about. Now, sometimes there can also be a problem. And what's that problem? There could also be a conflict between local versus global. So I'm going to talk about this. So here is a conflict. And I'll call this local versus global. Now, what does this actually mean? It means that I can say I create a variable x and I call this 10. Now, this is global. Then I go on to create. Now, inside of that, inside of the function, I create a local variable. I call it x again. And this here is 20. Now, this, right, is a local variable. And it has no business. It has no business. This local variable has no business with this, right? They may share the same variable name, but they have no business with each other. Now, I go on here and I say print, and I say inside function, right? Let me put this here, and I say x. Now, this has been created. Now, you see all this here. We have a global variable over here, and we have a local variable just inside here. Now, I am supposed to, when I come over here and I make a function call for update. Do you see what it does? It brings out the value in the local variable. But check this out. If I go on to say print outside function, and I go on to say X, you guessed it right, it's going to print this guy. Right, so you see that these are two different things, right? Be careful not to mix the local variable with the global variable. It's a thing, right? And this might just come off sometimes, right, as you know, a little bit of confusion, right? So it could be a conflict because you've created this. So sometimes what you want to do is maybe use maybe a different variable name, but this kind of things happen, right? And so in the next video, we're going to talk about modifying a global variable, right? There's a situation, and that's typically what gets a lot of people worked up when learning. So what's a global keyword? When I see that, what does that mean? Right? So that is, and also folks sometimes feel like we can create a global variable and we want to make use of it inside our function. How do we do that? Next video.